Welcome to today's class, everybody. Um, uh, in the last class, right, we talked about Express, we talked about NPM and Express, right? We saw how we could install packages. We saw what packages were. We also talked about how to set up Express, right? The basic Express. Now, in this next class, right, we'll talk about RESTful APIs, right? We're also going to talk about uh, uh what is HTTP and what are HTTP properties. The HTTP properties we would work with. And when I mean HTTP properties, whether you're a front-end developer or a back-end developer, you are definitely going to work with HTTP properties, right? Then also, we'll look at routing in Express. So routing is a big topic in Express. And we'll see how that works, right? So this is the summary of what we are going to talk about today. And let's go to the next page. Introduction to APIs. So what are APIs? I know you guys have heard APIs, APIs, APIs. You guys have also heard back end. What is back end? What are APIs, right? Then what are RESTful APIs? So there are different types of APIs, right? But we'll talk about RESTful APIs. Then we'll look at HTTP, right, as a topic. What is HTTP? Why is it even important to our lives as developers? Then we'll look at the request and response properties of HTTP, right? Then after that, we'll see how to route in Express. So, of course, each of the feature, right, that you want to develop is going to be in its own route, so it can be accessed. Routing is more like saying you're putting each feature in a folder, kind of. Okay, if you think about it that way. Then we're also going to look at how to test with Postman and REST client. So you're developing APIs, right? And you want to verify that these APIs are working, at least using manual testing, right? We've not gone to automated testing, right? So to manually know that, oh, these APIs are working, right? How do you do that? You're going to see how we do that. So let's start with APIs. What are APIs? So API is the short form of application program interface. And what do APIs do? API is just a service, right? It's a service that has an interface, right? Or let's just say APIs are just interfaces, right? That you can interact with. The same way we have GUI, right? We have GUI, we have CLI, we also have API. So who knows? Someone should tell me the full meaning of GUI and the full meaning of CLI. Let's start from there. Who knows? Because I know in a secondary school or in a university, we've come across that word before. I'm very, very sure. So what's the full meaning of GUI? What's the full meaning of CLI? Anybody can try. I'm listening. Anybody? Okay, someone says GUI is graphical or graphic user interface. That's correct. How about CLI? What's the full meaning of CLI? Someone should try. Someone should try.
Command line interface.
Should try. Okay. Command line interface. Yeah, that's correct. So we have GUI, we have CLI, and also you notice that these are interfaces, right? So these are structures put in place for you to be able to interact with something. Okay, so we have CLI. CLI is an interface used to interact with your computer, but the CLI is just the black and white screen with a cursor, which you can interact with, right? Then we also have GUI. So GUI is a colorful interface, an interface that has text with fonts and font size, buttons, and maybe pictures and all those stuff, right? And all you just need to do is click. Maybe you can double click on a button or a picture to take certain actions. So it's not just, so CLI is text based, right? GUI is more of you clicking, maybe double clicking, right clicking, maybe typing to fill in form, right? Then API, we now come to API. What are APIs? APIs are just interfaces you use to interact with your backend. Okay, so without the API, right? It's in fact it's not easy. It won't be easy for you to interact with your backend, right? So API is that interface, right? That helps you interact with your backend. Also, some people also call backend API, right? So it's not also wrong. You can say you develop an API, right? An API is just simply a service that listens to requests, right? And it sends back a response, right? Okay, so that's an API, right? It's an interface where you can interact with uh, an infrastructure, right? Then there are different types of APIs, but depending on what you're written with. There are APIs that are written with just socket IO. There are APIs that are written with maybe MQTT and all those stuff, right? But then there are what is called RESTful APIs. What are RESTful APIs? So RESTful APIs, okay, what is the full meaning of REST first? Because REST is an acronym. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. The RE stands for representational, while S stands for state, and then T stands for transfer. So this is the thing with RESTful APIs, right? RESTful APIs are stateless. So they don't know the state, right, of a particular user. So let me explain, let me give an example. When you but it's something we don't really notice, right? When you log into, let's say a website, right? When you log in, after logging in, the back end itself doesn't really know that you're logged in. It is when you make a subsequent request and you supply the necessary details for that request. If that request is to a secured route, you supply the necessary details that that route needs, and then when once that request, right, is received by the backend is processed, and then a response is sent back from the backend. The backend forgets who you are, right? The backend doesn't know that you made a request before, and then you're trying to get a response, right? Like it doesn't, it's just like saying um you went to buy something in a shop, right? And then you bought what you wanted to, you got what you wanted to buy, and then let's take for example, you didn't collect your change, right? Going back to that shop, imagine they tell you that we don't know you, even if you just like entered the shop and it just came out like a second ago. But for the fact that that transaction was completed and you left the shop and you didn't collect your change, they didn't remember you, even if you just walk in and tell them you want to collect your change. So that's how RESTful APIs are. They don't keep the state of of any transaction they've made with any user. Okay. So now you'll be asking, well, how is it that when you interact with the site and you're logged in, let's say the backend of the site, right? It still knows that you're logged in. That's because there's a certain credential after logging in that you as maybe let's say the mobile developer saves on his end, or the person that built the front end of the website saved on his end. So that token, right, is a form of identity. So when you log in, it's just like saying when you log in, I give you maybe a certain number. I tell you, keep this number. Each time you want to make a secured uh, request to me, right? Share me this number, and I'll use that number to know exactly who you are. Or maybe certain characters. I just tell you, since you're logged in, right? Hold this character. In fact, let me give you a real life analogy. When you start working for a company, right, there is an agreement form you sign, right? Now, if the company is not sure if you're their staff or not, if or like they are not sure that you're their staff, what they will tell you is, okay, bring this agreement letter or this form and then show us. And then if you can show that to prove that you're their staff, then you're their staff. Okay, so that's the same scenario when you log in. When you log in, a credential is given to you, and then you use that credential at any other place you want to make a secure request to an API. You use that credential to prove to the API that you are who you say you are. Okay. Then that's for RESTful APIs. So RESTful APIs just make, they listen to requests and then they make response immediately, right? Or maybe not immediately, but they make response after processing that request, right? Now, on no account will a RESTful API just send you a response without you making a request. So as a backend developer building RESTful APIs, you're always going to first get a request from a client before you can send a response. Now, you must have heard the term client and server, right? And you'll be wondering what is the difference, right? So clients are people on a part of the internet that use things that, or use devices that connect to the internet and maybe make requests to a server. Something like your phone, your laptop, and every device that is under the IoT Internet of Things platform, like something like maybe a printer that can connect to the internet, or a television that can connect to the internet, or maybe a refrigerator and air conditioner that connects to the internet. All these things are on the client side of the internet. Okay. Then when we talk about server side, what are we referring to? We are just referring to a computer or an infrastructure that sits somewhere that listens to requests from a client. So if you build let's say if you build an API, right? And then you run it on your system and you connect your system to the internet in such a way that your system can listen to requests on the internet and then make response. You've converted your system to a server because it will be able to listen to requests from anywhere on the internet, from anybody on the internet that sends requests to it, and then it can send a response. Okay, so a server is just simply a computer sitting somewhere that has a code written to it to listen to requests online and make response. While clients, right, are people that actually make the response and then make the request and then get a response back for that request. I hope I'm not confusing you guys between the difference between a client and a server. I hope you guys are not confused about that. Everybody following, right? Nobody saying anything.
So I'm not really following this. I'm not really following, sir, this last part.
Okay, the client and the server, right? Are you talking about clients and server architecture?
Yes, client and server, yes, sir.
Okay, so let me go over it again. Now, there are two kinds of people that use RESTful APIs, right? Or let's not say two kinds of people. There are two kinds of people that use the internet, right? Right? Two major kind of people. That's when we are talking about RESTful APIs. We're talking about, or when we are talking about HTTP, sorry, we're talking about clients and servers, right? Or clients, users, and then servers, right? Now, people that make requests to the internet and get response, right? Are people on the server side, are people on the client side of the internet. Take for example your phone, right? When you go to your browser on your phone, you type www.facebook.com or www.google.com and you press enter. What you're doing there is you're sending a request to the server, maybe Facebook server or Google server. You're making a request to the Facebook server, right? Now, you that is using your phone, right? Your phone is a client, right? Even if it's a computer that you made to you made that request, maybe you open your browser on your computer and you made a request to facebook.com, right? You are a client because you're the one making a request for a page, and then you get a page as a response from Facebook. Okay. Now, Facebook has their server, right? That sits somewhere and listens to requests from anybody on the internet. Now, you will maybe probably never see that server, right? That server might be buried inside water. It might be on the surface of the earth somewhere in another country you don't know, right? Now, you've made your request and all you just know is you just want to get a response. But when that request goes on the internet, right, it looks for a way to get to Facebook's server. So Facebook server is just listening. When once it gets your request, right, it processes that request and it sends back an appropriate response for that request. Now, Facebook have their own server, right, that listens to clients' requests. You that is making that request, whether on your phone or on your laptop or through a mobile app, right? You are on the client part of the internet, right? You are on the client's part because you're the one making the request. You're the one using the client specific application. Like you're using your browser or you're using a mobile app to make that request, or whether even if you're using Postman, right? You're using any of those things, right? You're trying to make a request to a server and you're expecting a response from that server. You are on the client side of things. Now, the server part of things, right, is what Facebook develops, what Facebook maintains. Facebook maintains their server. Facebook also develops like the Facebook.com, which is the client part, right? But Facebook also has their servers, right, where they host the code that is supposed to listen to your request and then make a response back for that request you've made. I hope I have made things clear to you now. Is it still confusing to you?
Yes, sir. It's very clear now. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Does anybody have any other question? So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now, this is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. First, hypertext refers to the link, right? How do you access a server or a website? You use your URL, right? It can be referred to also as a hypertext. Now, whatever you're transmitting over the internet, right? You're transferring it over the internet as text. So whatever, if I'm sending you even if it's a picture, that picture is somehow converted to text and transferred over the internet. Then when it reaches the other end, right, or like the receiver's end, it's being coupled again back to the picture that you sent and then maybe saved or processed or any other thing. Now we have some we used to see HTTPS. Now HTTP is not the only protocol on the internet. We have TCP. TCP is another protocol on the internet. We have UDP. UDP is another protocol. There are a lot of other protocols, but for people that use the internet that want to build RESTful APIs, right, they use HTTP to transfer information, right, between clients and servers. Okay. Then let's talk about routing, right? We've talked about request and response, right? Now, each request and response over the internet has properties they work with, and I will explain. Hope you guys are still hearing me clearly. Each and every HTTP request and response has properties with it. Now, let's look at the request properties, HTTP request properties. What are the properties that are concerned with an HTTP request? So you as a client, when you make a request to a website, right? What reaches their end? First, every HTTP request you make has what is called an HTTP request method. So An HTTP request method is a method used to describe the kind of action that is expected to be executed on the end, on that API's end. So let me give an example of some HTTP methods. We have get as an HTTP method. We have post as an HTTP method. We have put as an HTTP method, and we have delete as an HTTP method. Now, if you work with front end, you already know that get is used to get, right? It's used to get information, right? From a server, right? And get most times doesn't accept you to input request body, right? If you try to, if you're using Axios, right? You to make a request, you can't really include a request body if you're sending a get request. Okay, then we have post, and from what we know, post is used to add a new data to an API. Okay, so if you want to add a new, maybe a new let's take for example when you do Facebook posts, right? When you're scrolling through people's posts, each time as you're scrolling through people's posts, new posts are being loaded, right? You don't really know that there's a get request sent while you're scrolling to get new posts to fill down while you're scrolling, right? You might not notice that, but you're making get requests while scrolling. We also have post requests. Now, post requests are used to add data. So when you, let's take Facebook, for example, when you click to write your post, right, or to post your picture, for example, you're actually making a post request. Okay, you make a post request. The server is going to understand that what you're trying to tell it is you want it to say this the information you're sending to it. Then we also have put request, right? Put request is used to edit, right, or to change what already exists on the browser. Sorry, what exists on the server, right? You're telling your server or your backend, see, I want you to change this property. Then we have delete, and delete is quite explanatory, right? You're trying to remove the data, right, from your server or from your back end infrastructure. Okay, so that's HTTP methods. There are other methods apart from this ones I've mentioned. There is patch, there is head method, there is option method, right? But I mean, yeah, there is option method, there is patch. So there are other methods. Okay, but these ones I mentioned are the ones that are more popular. Okay, then every method, or sorry, every HTTP request has what is called a URL, Uniform Resource Locator. And that URL is divided into different aspects. You have the URL will contain the protocol, because the protocol can be HTTP or HTTPS. The protocol could be WS, right? So WS is for WebSockets, right? HTTPS, and the S there just stands for secured. So if you have HTTPS, it just means it's HTTP, but a secured HTTP connection, right? And then HTTP is just not secured. So HTTPS just means that whatever you're transferring from maybe your browser or from that app to the server, right, is secured, is encrypted at your end, and when it reaches the server and it is decrypted, and anybody that is trying to eavesdrop on your data wouldn't get the plain text for that data. Instead, they will get the encrypted form of that data. Okay, so does anybody have any question on what I've said so far? Any question? Okay, in the absence of questions, so we know that now, apart from the protocol and the base URL. Okay, the base URL. The base URL contains the protocol too. So maybe let's take for example the name of my server, right? After hosting it, or the name of my backend after hosting it is KodeCamp. Let's say api.kodecamp.com. Of course, if I want to make a request to it, I'll say https colon then with double slash, and I'll say api.codecamp.com, for example, right? If I want to make a request to the login, maybe login route, right? I would say api.codecamp.com/login. Now, /login is the route part of that URL, right? So that's a route. It might be /register, it might be / something else. But from that / is the route part, okay? The part before the / is the base URL part, which contains the protocol, right? Now, we also have request headers. Now, request headers give more information to the kind of data that you're sending, right? And if there is any authorization header. I know what I'm saying now might be sounding a bit confusing to you guys, but when we start using it, you will understand. When we start using it and come back to what this video, you understand. HTTP headers are used to describe the kind of data you're trying to send to your server. For example, if you're trying to send text to your server, just ordinary text, you would want to say inside your header, right? Inside your request header that the content type is plain text, right? Or if it is JSON, you would say application/JSON. If you're sending pictures, right, or videos to your server, you want to say multi-part, right? Okay. Someone is raising up his hand, and Precious, you're raising up your hand. You have a question?
Yeah, I don't know. Are you sharing another screen? Because what I'm seeing is top to cover alone. I are seeing a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm not sharing another screen. Like I'm still on this screen where you're seeing the routing. Yeah, I'm still here. I'm not sharing another screen. Okay. So we have request headers, right? Request headers are used to provide more information, right? So request headers can contain the content type for the request you're making. It can contain the authorization header, which is used to identify you, and it can contain information about whether you're catching or you're not catching information on your server. It contains a whole lot of things, right? Okay, then it also, yeah, it contains things like that, right? What kind of data does the backend accept? A lot of those things. Okay, then also another thing that your response or your request property would contain, right? Your request would also contain a body. So the body is the data you actually want to send to the backend, which is either maybe a picture, maybe a JSON file, maybe you want to send JavaScript, or maybe you want to send text, anyone you want to send, right? So the body contains that, and I think I'll give an example. So we have the request body, right? Request body contains information about like the actual information. So for example, if you're trying to log in, right? When you're sending a request to the login route, the request body, right, is going to contain your username, your password, or your email and your password and all those stuff. Right. Now, each time you go on your browser and maybe you type www.facebook.com, you're actually making a get request to www.facebook.com /. Right. and you're making a request to the port of 80, the port 80. That's the port you're making your request to. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the request property. So when you make that request finally, right, the response comes back, and the response also has its properties. Now, the response property that will come back is first you receive a status code. So now, if you go online and you check status code, just type HTTP status code, you'll find out that there are a lot of status code. Is 200, right? 200 is the more popular one. 200 signifies that your request was successfully processed. Like what you expect, right? That let's take for example you're logging in and you're expecting a token, right? When that token comes back, it's going to come back with a 200 status code to tell you that okay, this processed well, right? We have 201. 201 means created. So if you're trying to, let's say you're trying to register on a website, you send in your first name, your last name, your email, your password, your date of birth, your gender, and all this stuff. I hope nobody here tries to identify as a baseball. Okay, so you send all those things to the backend, right? When the backend creates that information, right? Like let's say that information was created successfully. What you're going to get as a status code from that backend will be 201. Okay, there's 202. 202 is used when, let's take for example, you're trying to make payments, right? And then maybe while trying to make that payment, you see an information that comes up that your request is being processed. Maybe that is the response. So, but that request is not totally processed, right? Maybe it has not been totally processed. Maybe while sending you that response, right? The information is still being processed, and maybe another response might be sent to you later on. So that status code for that scenario would be 202, right? I know everybody is familiar with 404. 404 means not found. So if you try to visit, maybe if you try to visit a page on a site that doesn't exist, you might get a 404, right? Or 500. 500 is internal server issues. So these are status code are really divided. Anything that has to do with two, let's say 200, 201, 202, 205, whatever, 203, all those have to do with successful statuses. Anything that has to do with three, like 300, 301, and the rest has to do with redirecting. So maybe redirecting temporarily or redirecting permanently and all the stuff. Then anything that has to do with 4 has to do with client error, right? So 401, 400, 402, 403, 404, they have to do with either not authorizing the client to do something or an issue with the client. Maybe like 400, for example, is saying the client sent a bad request, right, to the server. Then 500, anything that has to do with 5 has to do with server issues. So like 500, for example, is saying, okay, that this an error, right, occurred, but the error is from the server, right? It's not from the client. Okay, so someone is raising up his hand. Barry and Barry. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry.
Good
Huey.
afternoon. Yes, my name is Huey.
Huh?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Huey.
Huey.
Yeah, as a backend developer, yeah, can
Yeah.
can I create just as a backend developer, can I create a status code, like and like give it a number of, let's say 50 something? Can I create my own status code?
Well, For if you're talking about the standard, I'm not sure you can actually do that. I'm not sure because I haven't done that before. Because now the thing is, the status codes you have already, the default status codes you have are status codes that can always meet your needs. We have a lot of them. So if you check through a list of them, right, you will see that they should meet your needs. So I don't think there is a reason you would want to create a new status code of yours, a brand new status code of yours. Of course, when you are sending a response with a specific status code, right, you should also be able to send the request, that response with a body to describe the problem, right, or to describe what has happened. You understand? So if you're sending a a response with 500, at least you should send a descriptive error message to tell the person this didn't occur, this didn't work out because this wasn't provided or this is missing and other stuff, right? Even if it's for 400, or of course, when you do 400, you see file not found, but it might not really be a file, right? So on the back end, if you're sending 404, you should tell the person, maybe if the person is trying to look for a user that doesn't exist, you say 404, but your response body should say this user does not exist or this user was not found. Okay, so you should be able to use the default status code, but describe the response you're giving, right, to the user. I hope I've answered your question. Hello, Fiwe. Have I
Yes,
answered your question?
boss, you have. You said
Okay.
you're not certain. Said you're not certain.
Okay, yeah. So just basically use what is already available, what is already there. Okay, then apart from status code, we also have the status message, right? Status code now, every status code has a status message. For example, 200, right, has a status message of okay, right? 201 has a status message of created. 404 has a status message of not found, right? Uh, 500 has a status message of internal server error. That status message is automatically added for you. It's not that you have to include them on your own, right? Okay, then a response, another property of a response is the response header, right? So the response header has information, so just as the same thing as the request header. The response header has information about what kind of response was sent. For example, what is the content type of that response? What is the length of the response that was sent to you? Is catching, or are there any catching instructions that was sent from the server to the client and all this stuff, and other server information? Also, the response message also contains the body, right? So the body is actually the actual response that you're looking for. So the response might be HTML, the response might be JSON, the response might be a file, the response might be a text, a simple text. Okay, so we've talked about this, right? Let me just go over it. The request properties, right? HTTP request properties, we have the method, we have URL, we have header, we have body. Then we have that the response message, the response property would also always contain status code, status message, the header, and the body for the response. Now, let's see how this works in RESTful APIs, right? Let's see how this works. So I'm going to reshare my screen because I've been talking since, and I'm very sure that it's not everybody that's actually following. So let's swing into action. So this is where we stopped in the last class, right? Now, we made a request, or we made some certain, we did something in my last class, which is what you're seeing on the screen, right? Let me make it a bit bigger. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay. Hello? Can you guys still hear me? Can anybody just say something? Can
Yes,
you hear
boss.
me?
Boss, I
Okay.
can hear you.
Okay. Thank God. Okay. So now look, we have two routes here. We have the home route, which is just forward slash, and we have about. Now, if I spin up this server, right, I would want to test it, right? I want to test it, but I don't want to test it with the browser because I can't make a post request by typing the URL of this the URL to this server, right? No, what I will do is I'll come to extensions. I want to test this to show you guys what I've been talking about since. I'll come here, and for you guys that don't have it, you install REST client. REST client is an extension that enables you send HTTP requests directly from your browser. Sorry, directly from VS Code. So when you install this REST client, right? What do they tell you to do? You should create a file named you should create a file with the extension .rest or .http. So this is it. What I just need to do is I'll come here and create a new file. I'll call it maybe test. I like calling mine test, but it doesn't matter whatever I call it. Just make sure it has the .rest or .http extension, right? So but I'll name mine .rest. Well, once we do that, we can send a request to this server. But first and foremost, this server is not up. This server here is not up. So I have to start it up. So how did we say we should start our server? We said dev. So I'll just come here. I'll say npm run dev and press enter. The server is up. Short and simple. Then I can come back here. How do I make that request now? So now, first, what is the request? What do we have here? Get, right? Get. And remember that here, our server is running on port 3000, right? So I'll say I'm making a get request to http colon /. Of course, since this is running on my system, it's local host. Now with the port of 3000. Of course, you can change this localhost to 127.0.0.1. Of course, I've written that out, right? Now, if I wait, now if you notice, when once I wrote that out, right? And when once I write this out, I get this send request button, right? When I click send request, it's going to send a request to the server, and then I now get a response. Hello, people. I see that. I get a response. If I want to send a request to /about, and this will respond with this is the about page. What I'll just do is come here and say, let me close this out. I'll say /about and click send request. You see, mine it is getting this is the about page. I see that. Okay. Now, if you notice, what I did here is I gave it an HTTP verb or HTTP method. It can also be called an HTTP verb, right? I said I'm making a GET request to this URL, right? This URL contains protocol. We can call this the URL itself, right? And then this is the route to what I want to actually fix. or what yeah, this is the route I want to actually send my query to, right? Or send my request to. Okay, so I made this request and I got back this response. If I make the same request to Google, let's say HTTPS colon google.com with /, we'll see something interesting, right? No, this one is different. Look, so what we just talked about. This is our HTTP status code. This is our HTTP status. Sorry, these are HTTP status message. So 200 status code 2 okay is status message. Then from whatever you're seeing here is the body of our response. Our response body is what all you're seeing here up here is our response body. Then from here down is sorry from here where you're seeing these dates down to this point is our request header. Then here is from this doc type is what you're seeing as our request body. Now what can we see from here? We see that content type is text /HTML. This therefore means that when going to google.com, what is sent back to us is HTML. So if the browser receives this HTML that has been sent back to us, it is going to process it as HTML and show us the end product of processing this HTML. Okay. Now let's go back to send ourselves that request. Let's go back and use our own to send request. Now look, we have the HTTP version, right, which is 1.1. We have the HTTP status code, which is 200. We have this HTTP status message, which is okay. Then here is where we have the details about the response header, right? So this is X powered by is telling you what kind of service powering this API, which is Express. Then our content type is text.html. Of course, this is referred to as HTML because we are just saying res.send. So it's just assume that this is HTML text, right? But this is just ordinary text and it can be processed as HTML. So if the browser receives this, the browser is just going to show this as HTML. I can decide to use maybe HTML tags in here. I can decide to write HTML tags, maybe using, I can wrap this in a div, I can wrap this in a p tag, and if this was loaded by the browser, that p tag will take this effect. So this is the header, right? There are a lot of things, the date that request was made, and after making that request, right, the connection, when that response is sent, I get this connection closed. This connection closed means that response has been gotten right from the browser, sorry, from the server, right? And as that response has been gotten, the server has closed that connection. So if I want to make another request to the server, I need to establish another connection again with the server as a client. I need to establish a connection and then make that request before I get a response. Okay, so then this here is the request body. Sorry, did I say request body? This is the response body for that request I just made. Now, I said you can only send, you're only allowed to send request body, right? When you make a post request. But a post request can't be processed. The request body of a post request can't be processed now because we haven't included the middleware to process request bodies. Now I'll explain. If you've used some other frameworks or maybe some other programming language to write your backend. Let's say if you're an experienced backend developer, some might already be processing your request by default, right? But Express doesn't work that way. Express will tell you to set that up. So for me to set that about, say, server.use, then I would say server.js, server.url. Server dot it's supposed to be URL included, if I'm correct. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to include a middleware to help me process requests, right? So middlewares actually process requests, and if we said server dot, let me see, we have to do, it. Server.json. Okay, so this should come directly from Express, not from the server, I guess. Okay, so if I wrote Express dot J, okay, yeah, okay. So now let me explain what middlewares are so let me check also if I said dot URL. Okay. So JSON. So I'm sorry about that. Now, middlewares in Express. This brings us to another topic in Express, which I'll just touch a bit. Middlewares. Now, this is how your request works, right? When the request comes to your backend, the request goes to Express first. Express now passes it to any middleware first, right? If it sees if there's any middleware that is supposed to handle that request, that middleware will handle the request and send the request to the next middleware if necessary, right? So now what is happening is when you send the request, Express gets that request. Express sends that request to get. So Express checks first. Is there any, for example, let's say I'm sending a request to /about. Express will check, is there any route that corresponds with /about? If there is any route that corresponds with /about, Express is going to hand that request to that route. And of course, handling the request to that route will hand over that request to the handler for that route. Now, this is the handler. This function here is the handler for any request that comes to /about. Okay. So now you can decide that before that request gets to /about, it should be handled by a middleware. For example, I can create a middleware to print out maybe the request method that you're sending. For example, let me create a simple middleware. Let me remove this first. I'll say server.use, and I'll say function, and of course I'll say request response next. Now, request, right, has everything to do with the request you're sending, the request properties. Response here has to do with response properties. This next here is a function that calls the next route, if there's any next route. So look at this. I can say console.log request dot protocol maybe request dot URL and request dot init dot trail. Okay, then after that I can call the next. Now without me calling this next function, that request is not going to reach the router that is supposed to handle it. So after doing that, I'll come and crash the server and start it up again. Look at this. Now let me make that same request again. You people will notice something. Hello, are you guys noticing this? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, you guys notice that it should. Let's come back here. So it showed first the protocol, which is HTTP. It showed the URL, right? Which is /about. It didn't show the base URL, it just showed the route, which I still call the URL by Express, which is /about. It also shows us the method, right? I can decide that each time that a request comes in, we should always, maybe we should console.log out something, right? I can use this. So this on its own is a middleware. Now Express out of the box doesn't. So let me do this. Let me create a login route. Dot login. Sorry, dot get, and I'll just say /login function REQRES request and response, and then I console.log. I'll say request body. Sorry. Request body. And I'll say request body. No, and then let me send 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 a request. Look at this. If I send this is supposed to be a post request. Yeah. So if I send a post request with /login and I sent in my username and password, it's not going to recognize it. Look at this. Let me crash the server and start it again. Now let me change this to post. This is how I'll make that request. Post to login. Then of course, each time I want to make a request that has to do with post, that has to do with me sending data to the backend, most importantly, I have to declare the contents type. The contents type will be application/JSON. Then I'll have to skip a line here, and then JSON, maybe with my username, maybe Victor. Password. I said that you will see that the request was sent, but here when I log it out, we see that the request body is undefined. Why? Because we've not told Express that we are actually expecting a request body and it should process that request body, especially a JSON request body. We've not told it that. So now, how do we tell Express to recognize our request body and process it? This is how we do that. We come back here, and then at the top here, we can say server.use, and then we would say express.json. What we've done here is we are saying use express.json, right? Like, sorry, when a server comes in, before the server gets to the handler, use express.json to work on the request that was sent before it reaches the server, or sorry, before it reached the request handler. Work on that response. So now look at this. If I crash the server again and start it, Now, the reason I'm crashing the server and starting it up again is Express for now isn't going to notice the changes I've made to the server except I stop and start the server again. But of course, definitely we'll find a way around this already. There is a solution to this. So instead of me crashing my server, I can make Express listen to changes. Okay. There is a solution to it. Okay. Let's come back here. Let me make that request again. And if you've noticed, the request now comes back with request body with username of Victor and then password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And why is that even possible? Why do we have that? It's because we've declared a middleware here. We've declared a middleware to process any JSON requests that is coming in. So simple way to understand this is just that anytime you're sending JSON to backend, right? If you don't have this middleware, right, your requests won't be processed. Now, another way of using this, now, what I've done here is whatever route, right, that comes below this express.json, whatever route that comes below it is going to have this express.json. So as far as the route is below it, right, below this line of code, is going to have the effect of this express.json, which means if that route is expecting JSON, right, that JSON will be processed first before it reach the handler for that request. Also, I can decide to include this to a particular route, but which is not really advisable. Just put it there, right? So this, what I'm doing here is I'm saying for all the routes that comes under this line 5, if it is a post request, then work on the request body. But what if I wanted to just restrict it to a particular route? For example, I wanted to restrict it to post route. What I'll do is, if I want a middleware for this route specifically, that login route specifically, right? I would say express.json that way, and then crash this code, and then start it again. And if I make that request, it will still work perfectly well. Because what I'm saying now is when that request hits this route, right? Before that request is sent to the handler, it should first pass through this middleware. Now this is a route level middleware, right? So this is for this particular route, this login route, right? With this handler. This is for this particular route. But then if I want this to affect the whole project, then that's when I would want to use app.use and server.use. So it's better you just use server.use at every time you have the chance. Server.use, and then of course you use that. Now there's also a middleware to process files that are sent to the server, right? So in case if you're working with a server that is going to accept files, what you would then want to do is you say server.use, and then you say express dot URL encoded, right? Okay, so anything that is URL encoded is also another form, right, of sending, or another method of sending data to your backend, right? You can send JSON data, you can send data that are URL encoded. Okay, so any of them would work. So, but by default, what we do, or what I do is I just set all this up at once, knowing very well that anytime I want to use them, anytime I want to send any kind of request, right? If it is necessary that that request has to be processed by any of this middleware, it is going to be processed. Okay. Then we've seen how to test, right? So now look at this. What did we include here? We included a content type of application/JSON. If I want to access this content type on the route, how do I access it? For example, on this post, how do I access it? I'll say maybe console.log. Console.log, I'll just say content type. Content type would be req.header dot I think this should be content type. Here it's headers. Request headers. Okay, so this headers is not, the other headers is used to set, not get. So I think this one is used to get. So content type. So I crash the server now. Please crash. Okay. Then I run it again and come to make the request again. Okay, it says content type is undefined. So let me come back here and see why is content type undefined. So if I change this to all lowercase, content type, let me run the server again and make the requests. Okay, so content type was supposed to be all in small letters. So we see that the content type being sent from the request, right, is application/JSON. Okay, but what we are getting in response is text.html. I can change that. I can also decide that I want to respond using I want to respond with JSON. So how would I want to do that? How would I want to respond with JSON? This is how I would want to respond with JSON. Maybe I would want to say you've logged in successfully. I just pass in an object to send, or I can decide to say res.json. Okay, you can use res.send or res.json. So res.json, I would say maybe this is what I like doing is successful. So then message. Now logged in successfully. Or then let me come and crash the server and start again. Okay. Okay, so and this extended, right? I know why it's saying I should provide that. I'll just say extended is false. Okay, so if I crash that and come back here and run it won't give me that error message anymore. Okay, so this extended, right? I haven't gone into knowing every detail of why it's false, but just always use extended or false. You can go through Express documentation to find out why this extended is false instead of true. You can also say extended or true, but I think it has its own. Okay, so the extended option allows to choose between passing the URL encoded data with the query string library when false, or with the query string library when true. Okay, whatever that means. All right, so let's continue. Right, if we come back here and we make that same request, you see something interesting. Okay, now you see it's successful through message logged in successfully. Your object is converted to JSON, right? That's one the first thing you should notice. This is JSON. What you wrote in here was a normal JavaScript object, but it's converted to JSON. That's number one. Number two, the content type here has been changed from text slash HTML to application slash JSON, right? This character set is talking about the kind of characters we're using. Is it UTF-8? Is it ASCII or so? But UTF-8 is what is usually used, right? You can research about what UTF-8 means, right? And other character encoding methods. Okay, cool. So yeah, we have application slash JSON here. So if we look at it, right, we see that and this e tag, right, changes per request. So if I make a request like 3 times, okay, sorry, it doesn't change per request, sorry. This is used to identify, I think, a request uniquely, right? So, or a request from a particular client uniquely. So if there is another client that sends a request, right? This e tag should change for that specific client. Okay, so with what I've said so far, is there any question? Any question? Who has any question to ask? Or is it overwhelming to you guys? Who has a question? Everybody understands?
It's a bit of a women, but we'll make ratio.
Sorry, what did you say?
It's a bit of a women, but I'll review it again.
Okay, you guys could rewatch the video, right?
Yes.
Okay. Precious is saying it's overwhelming. Okay. Okay. Someone it's Inusa is saying I'll have question after watching it again. Okay. Yeah, you need to watch this video like over again to grab everything I've said. Okay. So first, you need to understand that each time you're going to send a request via HTTP, it has to come with a certain structure, a very certain structure. For example, if you look at this has a structure. The kind of request, that's the method for that request, the URL for that request, right? The type of request that is being sent, and then the request itself, which is optional. Because if I'm making a GET request, I don't need to include my request body. So this here is the request body. It could be plain text, it could be JSON, it could be anything. Right? Then whatever you're seeing here is the header. Now let me do this same thing. Let me make requests using Postman. How many of you have used Postman here? How many of you have used Postman? Wow, nobody has used Postman. That's surprising.
I have used it.
Oh, okay. You've used it. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wow. We already have gurus here now. If it's like that, we have gurus here. People that have used Postman. Okay. No problem. So I'll share my Postman and I'll make the same request and you'll see exactly how it works. Right? I think Postman would make it a bit more simpler to understand what I'm doing. So I'm waiting for my Postman to load up. I'm waiting for my Postman to load up. It's still coming up. Well, once it loads up, I'll switch my screen to it. So then we'll continue. So while it's loading, I think I should just switch to the Postman screen. Can someone guess what Postman was built with? Someone should guess. What do you think? What's
Yes.
yeah?
Help us.
You say?
Love it. Help us, please.
Sorry, help you
Why?
with what, Barry?
Why are you calling love it?
I just find out.
Okay, I won't say
Yeah.
anything.
Maybe in a secret admirer.
It's Riyadh.
Yeah, someone is saying secret admirer. Okay, so this is the thing. Electron is what was used to develop Postman, right? Because Postman was an extension before, right? And it was written using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And they wanted to change it to a desktop app, but they wanted to change it to a desktop app without needing to build it from scratch again. So Electron is used to build desktop apps using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it makes it easy to build. Okay, so let's move on with what I'm supposed to do. You're not supposed to see that URL. Okay, yeah. So this what do I write here? What do I write here? What do I write here? I just say test. Then I'll create a new HTTP request. Of course, I could call this login. Wait, what did I do? Okay, so I could call this login. Here I would say HTTP colon with // localhost with the port of 3000 / login. Of course, it's a post request, right? So a post request, then no authorization parameter. I'll go over to the body part. See what I was talking about. I can send URL encoded body, right? Okay, URL encoded body is similar to like sending JSON, right? You can't send files through URL encoded except you're using form data. It's form data I can decide that I want to send a file. Okay, now look at this. I could say my username is Victor. My password is 123456. And I can send that request. Okay, so I'm not getting a response. Let me find out why I'm not getting a response. Okay, I'm not getting a response because I crashed the server. So I've started the server up again and I've sent that request. And of course, I'm getting successful through and logged in successfully. Right. So this is me sending that same request in Postman. Of course, let's look at Postman makes it helpful, right, to add headers to us. Now look at this. If you come here to our request headers and we want to see the 9 hidden headers, you see that it automatically added a content type for us, which is application / www form URL encoded. Now, the reason this is even working out, right, is because we added that URL encoded middleware. If not, it wouldn't be able to process that request. If I check, yeah, and so I just looked at my VS Code, the terminal, and I'm seeing my username and password neatly printed out here. Okay, so we have application / URL form encoded. We have the length, right? Calculated. So this is calculated when the request is sent. So this content length has to do with the number of characters in your request body, right? The host, this is going to also be gotten when the request is sent, and some other headers, right? Accept encoding. So the encoding is it what are I sending? Is it zip or whatever? right? You can get to, so if we check here, we recommend what using this header, accept encoding is added to indicate the server. To the server there, the Postman client supports a defined list of content encoding or completion algorithm. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so what I just need to do is save. If I wanted to send JSON, I think I'll come over to this raw and I'll convert this to JSON. Then I'll pass my JSON data here. I'll say username would be Victor, password would be 12345 6, and I can send that request, and of course I'll get a response. If we go back to, let's go back to Postman and see what we've done so far. So coming back here, let me expand this. This is the response body when I send a request using URL encoded. You see, it just added this object now, prototype, whatever here. Okay, but then the second one, which and it even showed us the content type, right, which we sent, right? Then here is when we sent the last one, right, which is JSON, application/JSON. We send it with this request body and the request content type and all the stuff. So that's how now we've been able to test using REST clients. We've been able to test using Postman, right? Does anybody have any question? Any question? Who has a question about what I just did? So nobody has a question. So which means everybody is good. Everybody understands.
Yes, boss, I have a question.
Okay, you can ask.
Boss, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I said you can ask your question.
Okay, I didn't get how.
Sorry, you said you didn't get how I did what? Hello, I can't hear you.
Linked your Postman to the terminal.
You say what? I didn't get you. Sorry. Please, can you come again?
Please, how did you link your Postman to the terminal?
No, I didn't have to link my Postman with the terminal. I didn't have to link it. All I just had to do was use the URL to my server, right? I can use Postman to load Google. Let me show you, right? I just need the correct link to where the back end or the front end is hosted on. So look at this. Remember that our service was running on port 3000, right? So if I just did a HTTPS with :/google.com, this is going to be a GET request, definitely. I send that. You're going to see something interesting here. You're going to see, okay, this is HTTPS www.google.com. Okay, saying error bad request. Okay, that's because I'm including a request body. So if I said there should be no request body and I send that request again, yeah, it comes back with something valid, right? Now this is me previewing, this is me looking at the raw HTML, right? Let me come to preview. looks more like it, right? Preview is going to try to load it like a browser. You see, it's loading it kind of like a browser. But if you come back here, whether pretty or raw shows it without arranging. Pretty tries as much as possible to arrange it. If you come here and you look, right, you're just viewing what came unprocessed from the browser. So I didn't have to do any form of linking. What I just needed was the correct URL, right? The correct URL and the correct method, right? And then I got the response I needed. So I hope I've answered your question.
All right, boss. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. So is there any other question? Does anybody have any other question? Anybody? Any question? So there is no other question currently. I think we can definitely call it a day, right?
Miami
Please,
is
you said you refresh on that on what I asked the other time. That you are going to, at the end of the class, that you are going to refresh.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's do it.
Hi.
Let me share. Let me go back to. Let me come back here. Okay. And let me go over it again. Let me just create a new file. I'll just call that revision revision.js. Let me stop this server, right? Okay. Now look at this. For the person that asked me to talk about functions again, right? I'll just go over it in a few minutes. What are functions? Functions are just a piece of code, right? So what does a function do, right? So I said a function is used to break your code into different callable parts, right? So you don't just want, maybe let's say your for example our backend, right? You don't just want all your code to execute at the same time. You want to divide it into different callable units, right? So that's where you need a function. Now, how do I write a function? First, you have to declare a function before you can use it, right? You have to first declare. Now, if there are two kinds of functions, right? There are internal functions. There's functions that came with JavaScript. So those functions, you just call them and use them. You don't need to declare them again. For example, I can pass int. Pass int is a function that comes with JavaScript that enables you to convert maybe a character, right? Or sorry, a string that's a valid number to a number. If I say pass int of 100, for example, console.log pass int of 100, and I come back here and say node revision, right? This 100 actually is a number, not a string. If we do type of, you come back here, you see that this is a number, right? It's a number that's been returned from this function, right? But it's a string we passed. but it's converting the string to a number and then we log it out. That's inbuilt functions, right? This is like pass int now is an example of an inbuilt function. Type of is an example of inbuilt function. I also mentioned that you can use type of in this way. You can put two brackets here and then we paste what you want to find out the type. So we say type of this. This also works similar way. Now, what if we want to write our own function, right? We want to declare our own function that can be used by us. This is how we do it. We would say function. Then after that, we give the function a name. And we call that function greet everyone. Let's just say the name of that function is greet everyone. Of course, that function is going to accept, or that function can do some certain things. Console.log, maybe I can say hello, icon, maybe hello, I'm not going to spell something incorrectly. Hello, precious. Maybe the last person would be. These are guys, so I'll say love it. Right, I can list out what I want to do. Now, writing this function, right? The function is not going to execute itself, right? If I run this code, nothing is going to happen because simply because we've written a function doesn't mean it's going to execute itself. Like this. Now, what I need to do to execute this function is to call the function. So I could say greet everyone, and then that way. Of course, if I call it and I run the code now, you see hello icon, hello period, hello precious, hello logit, right? I can decide to call this code, this function, multiple times, right? I can decide to call it 2 times, right? It's going to print this whole thing twice. I can decide to pair this function with a button. If I'm doing front end, if you click on this button, it should execute this function to print out this. I can pair it with an event. Maybe as soon as the website finishes loading, you should run this function. I can use it to do anything, but the basic thing is just that I've divided this function, I've divided my code, right, into a callable block called a function. Now I can write another function, right? I can try to write another function, maybe function, maybe function, I can say do something. Of course, I can write another function. And I can make this function, I can give it whatever I want here, right? And then I can call that function each time I want it to do anything for me, each time I want it to be executed. Okay, so I can have now this, this symbol here is called parentheses. So we use the name of the function with this parentheses to run it. Okay, then this curly braces you find here are the curly braces to the function. That's the body of the function. So what you want to be executed when you call that function, right, is this curly braces. Right, so anything you want to be executed inside that function, you put into these curly braces. So Echo, does it make sense to you now? Is it clearer?
Yes, sir, it's better. It's better now, sir.
Okay, so do you have any question?
No question, sir. I understand this part, sir. I understand it now.
Okay. What? Sorry, I didn't get you.
I said that I understand this part now, sir. I understand this part very well now. It's clear now.
Okay. So, do you have any other question?
For now, no, sir. I think I should go back to the video again Because when I was
Okay, all
looking
right.
at the video, I did not understand very well. I'll go back and look at it again. Thank you very much, sir, for taking time to explain this part.
Okay, you're welcome. So does any other person have any other question? Does any other person have a question to ask? Okay, so in the absence of
I think Celestine is
any
trying
other
to ask a
question,
question. I don't know. His hands have been up, so he should confirm.
okay. Celestine, are you trying to ask a question? Okay, Celestine, you can ask your question. I'm listening. Okay, yeah, Celestine, if your mic is back, you can write your question and drop it on the chat section of this call, right? You can do that. I'm looking at the chat section of this call in case you drop a question, because I can't hear you. And I'm sure you might want to ask a question. So drop your question on the chat.
Yeah, sent his question on
Okay.
the chat. So.
Yeah, I've seen it. How will you know? How will you know that your port is closed or open? Okay. So when your server is up, right? When your server is up and running, that port that you declared for that server will be open. Definitely. If your server is not running, then that port will be closed. Now, when you're offline, right? When you're like using Express offline, for example, that's all you need to know. As soon as you start up your server, your port is going to be open. Is going to be open. It's not going to be closed. Except Not even except okay, except your port is except your server is running on that port, and then you're trying to make a request to another port. That's when you might have issues. But if your server is running on, let's say, port 5,000, and then you send a request to port 5,000, your server will answer you. Your server is not going to be biased or going to feel that you've made too much request to me and I'm not going to answer you again. It doesn't happen. Okay, so look here in our index.js, right? I declared a port of 3,000, and when I'm making a request, I'm making a request to localhost with the port of 3,000. So if my server is up, of course my server is going to answer me, unless my server is not up. Of course, now you know my server is not up. Okay, so he says, how will you know that your port is closed or open after building our backend server and testing on Postman in terms of cybersecurity to prevent hacking? Okay, this is the complete question. Okay, I understand you. Now, you can use CORS, right, to restrict who can send requests to your server. Okay, so what is CORS? CORS means cross-origin request server. Yes, cross-origin request server. So what does CORS do, right? CORS helps you to restrict which clients can send requests to your server and get a response. So if I configure that my backend, this Express, for example, should only, I use CORS to configure that this my backend only should accept requests from HTTP, maybe I don't know, maybe it should only accept requests from front end, and that front end should be at let's say KodeCamp okay, yeah, cross-origin request sharing, sorry, not request server. So it should accept requests from maybe victor.com. right? If any other server, right, that is not running on victor.com tries to send a request to my backend is not going to accept it simply because that server, right, is not running on victor.com. It's not going to accept it. So CORS helps in sharing requests between two servers that are not on the same origin. Now, what does the origin there in CORS means? Now, my backend can be running on port 3000, right? Maybe the front end is running on, let's take, for example, the front end and the back end are offline. They are on my system. And I'm trying to run both of them and make the two of them share. So if the front end is running on port 5000 and the back end is running on port 3000, obviously they are not on the same origin because they are not on the same port. They are not origin. And of course, they cannot be on the same port if they are different code bases. Let's say the front end is using React, the back end is using Express. They can't run on the same port. If you run the backend on port 3000 and you try to run the front end on port 3000, to tell you that port 3000 is already in use. Okay. So what you can do is on the backend now, you can come and install CORS and say, CORS now, accept requests from only local hosts with the port of 5000. So now you can then load up your front end on the port of 5000 and then send your request and the backend will gladly accept it. But if you change your front end port to maybe port 8000 and try to send your request, the backend is seeing that your request is coming, but it's going to say, no, this is not this is not a port or an origin I accept request from. So no, I'm not even going to accept request from this person. So I hope I've answered your question. Celestine, have I answered your question? So I'll treat CORS as a topic on its own. CORS is a topic on its own. I think that I'll do that next week, right? We'll see how we can set up CORS on our server, how we can restrict each route is a single route, right? Using CORS. I can also restrict the whole server, right? The whole backend infrastructure using CORS, right? So we'll see that maybe in our next class or around next week, maybe one of the classes in next week, we are going to see how we can use CORS. So Celestine, have I answered your question? Are you still there? Or you can just say yes on the chat section or no, or you can just say it. All right, so he says I've answered this question. Is there any other question? Anybody has any other question? Okay, so in the absence of any other question, we will call it a day. Thank you very much for coming out for today's class, and I'll see you later. Bye guys, and have a nice day.